The next three questions is one, why have obesity rates increased in the United States so much in the last 50 years? Second question is, people often say to avoid carbs, the word carb. Very specifically, which are the exact carbs that we should eat? Name the actual, name them by name, each bean, each grain, name it so we're clear. And then number three, a lot of what we're talking about at this conference is obesity, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, all these statistics. One of the reasons we have this conference is there's a feeling of urgency that there are some very uncomfortable statistics that are uncomfortable to deal with. But I've read that in the last 50 years that the sperm counts have gone down by 60%. I've also read that the rate of autism has increased, and then that we had a speaker named Beth Lambert who wrote a book called A Compromised Generation, saying that years ago 12% of kids had childhood illness, and now it's at 54%. Just any thoughts on what's going on? And then then there's an increase with kids with allergies and asthma and ADHD and autism. So any thoughts about just the general, what these statistics mean? I mean, what is going on? Is it chemicals, or does, what are your thoughts on those statistics? Those are the three questions.
Well, I'm going to take the easy question. I want to talk about carbs, because I think people are terribly confused about carbs quite often. Carbs, we always seem to have the macronutrient villain of the decade. And this decade, it seems to be carbs have been blacklisted by a lot of people. I think number one, what people need to understand is the relative percent of macronutrients, if we're within sort of the necessary ranges, really don't matter as much as people think they do, if the sources of those macronutrients are healthy. When you're getting your nutrients from whole plant foods, whether or not you're consuming 10% fat or 20% or 30%, probably doesn't matter as nearly as much as the quality of that macronutrient. The same is true for carbohydrates. So one of the reasons carbohydrates have such a bad name is because probably 80 or 90% of the carbohydrates people in this country consume are consumed in the refined form. So what does that mean? What are refined carbohydrates? We'll take a whole plant food, remove almost everything of value to human health, and then before you eat it, add a bunch of things we know are relatively pathogenic, like the cheapest fat, the cheapest sugar, salt, colors, flavors, all of that, and then eat the stuff. And you cannot possibly achieve optimal health doing that. So there are two categories of refined carbohydrates. There are refined sugars, like what we see in soda, which are 47% of the sugar Americans consume comes from soda. And there are refined complex carbohydrates or starches. And when we refine starches, we're talking about white flour and white rice and cornstarch and so forth. And these don't come packaged with fiber or phytochemicals or antioxidants or plant sterols or stanols or any of the things that need to be associated with carbohydrate to ensure optimal health. And so we don't need to reduce our carbohydrate intake per se. We need to get rid of refined carbohydrates. And it's not even a matter of simple versus complex carbohydrates, because simple carbohydrates can be very healthy when they come from fruits and vegetables. And complex carbohydrates very healthy when they come from beans and starchy vegetables. So what we need to be doing is really very simple. Eating food in its whole form before it's stripped of everything of value, and we've added a bunch of harmful components to it. And so that's one of the reasons it makes sense to eat a whole food plant-based diet. Carbohydrates are not the enemy. The average intake in blue zones, and it ranges hugely in blue zones, but the average is about 62% of calories from carbohydrates, with a high of 80 or 85% in Okinawa and a low of maybe 40% in Ikaria, Greece, and then averaging around 60 or 65 in the Loma Linda and the Nicoya Peninsula in Sardinia. So it's all over the place, but generally we know that some of the healthiest people in the world, look at the tsunami, is it? Chimani. Where? Bolivia, right. So they consume, 72% of calories from carbohydrates. Where are those carbohydrates coming? These are the people with the lowest rates of heart disease on the planet. The carbohydrates are coming from plantains, they're coming from beans, they're coming from whole foods, and that's the key.
I just have one glib comment to piggyback onto that. Remember, I told you the only white things at your dinner table should be the tablecloth and the people eating dinner. And maybe cauliflower.
That's good. That may be better than what I was going to say, which is everything from lentils to lollipops is carbohydrate. Do you really want to reach summary judgment about all that? But I'll pivot from Brenda's beautiful answer, Milton's pithy addition, to the obesity question. Then I'll leave Milton to answer the question about every ailment under the sun, which was question 3, so good luck with that one. Why did obesity get so bad since 50 years ago? Why doesn't everybody have it is the question. Because, for starters, we're really good at gaining and storing weight as a safeguard against a rainy day. It's just sort of built into our metabolism. What's abnormal is the fact that there are excess calories available constantly. Our ability to turn that into an energy reserve is normal. Everything Brenda described about food processing relates directly to the obesity problem of the last half century. We invented multiple varieties of junk and called them food. We invented fast food. We invented drive-thrus. We invented suburban sprawl. Then we invented the internet and smartphones and social media so that all we ever need to do is move our thumbs and see how popular we are today. And all forms of physical activity are being expunged from our crazy, hectic, stressful lives. Almost everybody is on the seafood diet. I see food and I eat it. Food is ubiquitous. And as if that weren't all bad enough, corporate America tells us on a daily basis America runs on Dunkin'. It's like a confession. You want to know why everybody's fat? We're here to tell you. And then we know from Michael Moss, salt, sugar, fat. We knew from the Chicago Tribune before that there is a premium placed on the engineering of food that maximizes the calories it takes to feel full. So we are constantly exposed to hyper-palatable foods designed by people who literally get paid a bonus if they can make you eat more than you should. And we have all of these so-called labor-saving technologies that intrude into our day and make it ever harder to fit the native amount of motion back into our days, and on it goes. So it's a perfect storm. And the other critical thing to note is that we seem to wring our hands. You could ask the question, why are we so subject to obesity the last 50 years? Again, the amazing thing is that anybody is holding out. But the other issue is we wring our hands, epidemic obesity, we've tried so much, and why hasn't it gotten better? You'll hear the argument, we cut fat and got fatter, so that was wrong. No, we never cut fat. We got advice to cut fat, but in America, we don't like to cut stuff. There are 2 ways to reduce the percent of calories you get from fat. The sensible way, and the American way. The sensible way would be to actually eat a bit less fat. The American way is to say, hey, how about if I just eat more of everything else, all of those hyper-processed carbohydrate, I'll grow the denominator, the percent of calories I'm getting from fat will go down, that'll look good. That's what we did. That's actually what the data show. We did the same thing when we got foolish enough to think the problem was we picked the wrong macronutrient, let's cut carbs now, right? So, until we grow up and start embracing the importance of the actual foods we eat and overall diet quality, there are innumerable ways to eat badly and play into the hands of big food and corporate profit. So, those of us trying to fix obesity over the last half century have been bailing a sinking ship with pipettes, while corporate America has been flooding the boat with a fire hose. We've never even tried to fix epidemic obesity.
To just touch on what David said before I get to the impossible question, it's even worse than he described, because what's very interesting is that over the last 30 to 40 years, corporate American culture has really just sort of embraced this money-making dynamic, that it's all about increasing dividends, share value, market share. And when you think about it, the number of people in the U.S. population is relatively fixed. The number of people alive today in the United States is not significantly different from the number of people who were alive 50 years ago. So the question is, if you are McDonald's and you want to make more money, and you finally saturate the country with, these golden arches, what do? The number of people that you can potentially sell to is fixed. Well, you start making each individual item bigger. So I know that when I was a kid, a McDonald's hamburger was like this big. Had a thin little patty, 2 pieces of bread, and maybe some cheese. Now you've got double, triple, quarter pounders with 3 kinds of cheeses, bacon, and God knows what else on one burger. It used to be that a pizza was some bread with some cheese and tomato sauce and, some toppings. Now you got cheese in the bread, cheese on top of the bread, and cheese in the box. It's so people are finding ways to stuff more calories into each individual item. And that's coupled with, as he said, this culture where we're moving less and less and less. And the end result is rather predictable.